Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cousy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're
Can we
going to
start
talk.
over?
Yeah, sorry.
Because I was clicking as you started, and then I looked at you. Yeah, sorry. All right, let's go.
Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cousy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to talk about the ADPs that we hate in redraft. Redraft is Yahoo, ESPN, Sleeper. Um, the reason we just dislike these guys is because they just haven't caught up necessarily onto like if these guys should be that high. When you look at it too, it's like for us, we're really high on wide receivers. Wide receivers in PPR are, some of the guys that we want to get to. In redraft, we normally try to go like some sort of hero RB idea, I guess. But so when you have these guys pushed up so much higher, wide receivers fall naturally. And so if you watch our love video, we're on wide receivers and lower on running backs. And that's kind of reflected in this hates video. So.
Yeah, so a lot of these guys are just kind of way overvalued. A lot of them are running backs, and that correlates one because we're PPR ranking, but also we just kind of think that the wrong ones are kind of in the wrong spots.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just all running backs; it's some receivers, it's some tight ends, quarterbacks, what have you. Obviously, no kickers or defense. But yeah, we're going to just jump right into it. Start off with a guy that's just kind of really polarizing right now. But even worse from a redraft perspective, Nick Chubb. He's been all reliable for years for us. Emery has been the biggest, take a stand on Nick Chubb and just let it work. If we were in a keeper league, he would have had him every single year of his career, and it would have worked out. Other than last year, obviously going down week 2 with a second of his career significant knee injury. His ADP is just skyrocketed from, he had a viral squat video, and there's just like, oh, he's back. Well, a squat video will tell you absolutely nothing about playing running back. That just means you're, strength again, but that's not going to help you move side to side. And right now, we think it's a way overvalue if he was in the 110s. And on ESPN and Sleeper, he is going in the 7th round. And I just can't even get close to behind that. Even Yahoo, which it's much more reasonable at 116, I just don't think it's worth it. I just don't see any kind of ceiling from him this year. I think if you have a bunch of running back injuries go down, and he could maybe once he gets healthy, can provide you 12 a game,
Right.
maybe, but he's going to get essentially no receiving work, I don't think. I think that'll all go to Jerome Ford because he actually made the most of his production last year, was an RB2, very under the radar guy that if he's the second running back on the team, that could actually open him up and make him even more efficient. Well, with Nick Chubb, I just think he's a poor man's version of what Derrick Henry will be, and a very poor man's man at that. That's not saying we hate him as a player. That just, I can't anticipate the production. On top of that, there is no timetable for his return. I don't even have any confidence he'll be ready for the first month of the season. And so if there's a guy that is passing his prime, I have to take him in the 7th round, and he won't give me a ceiling. There's just no reason to take him, and that's why he starts off on our list.
Yeah. So I'm just sitting over here thinking about how sad it is that Nick Chubb isn't going to be, you know, as good as he has been in the past. Like injuries, of course, plague certain players. Nick Chubb, 3 more years of his production, probably a Hall of Famer, maybe, even 2. And so it sucks because, he's a guy that just is so good at football. You want to see win, and then this happens. We talked about it last year, when it did happen, we were, just like group text exploded, because he is that guy. He is that good. And I at least love his abilities and his, all the things that he stands for. He's a very quiet guy. He doesn't make problems, all those things. So, of course, him being on this list, it's tough, but it is what it is. Like, it's the truth because, he just can't. And he's also in I was looking at our rankings right before you finish talking. Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford are right next to each other. And that's a representation of the fact that if Nick Chubb does play, I feel like they're going to try to give him touches. if that's say 12 to 15 touches, that's probably, the realm of what he gets. That's not good enough for RB 28, in my opinion. Like, that's the same range that Zamir White's going in, who we could think who could get, 15 to 25 touches, like in that range, because we really don't know what's happening in the Raiders. But Rhamondre Stevenson, who else is in that range? Javonte Williams is behind them, and DeAndre Swift in that range. Like, I just can't see a path where he's better than any of those guys, and that's why this is the stand we're taking.
Yeah, and with Nick Chubb, like, if you want to say it's like a 1-2 punch similar to what he and Kareem Hunt were, where Kareem Hunt would vulture touchdowns and Nick Chubb would just have 25 touches a game.
Right.
The reason he was always a top 5 running back or top 7, 8 running back is because of his floor of just leading or being among the league leaders in touches or opportunities. And then he'll still get you your 8 to 10 touchdowns. He just never really eclipsed the 20 that I thought he would have been capable of if he didn't have such a good RB2 with his team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this year, it's the same thing, but he just won't have 20 touches. At best, he might give you maybe 2 games this year where he has 20 touches.
Right.
But I think he will be closer to 10 to 12 on a weekly basis. And again, why are you drafting a running back in the 7th, 8th round that's only going to touch the ball 12 times and none of it will be receiving?
Yep.
And he's never been, even in his peak, he was never really, he'll bust in an occasional screen, but I'm looking at 2021 when he was among, the top running backs and he had 25 targets.
That's crazy.
And it's like, that's too high this year.
1.5 a game.
Yeah. So
that's about right.
That's just kind of how we see. We just don't see any path whatsoever where he should be in the first 12 rounds of a draft, even in redraft to where you can stash him, IR spot him. When are you ever going to start him over somebody like a Najee or even if you like a Tony Pollard or Brian Robinson Jr.? I just don't know when I can confidently put him above those guys.
Chase Brown.
Because all those guys have weekly upside for 15 to 18 touches and a lot of passing game work. He has no passing game work, which obviously PPR ranking that brings him down even more.
Mm-hmm.
Wanting to be ready week 1, and he's past his prime, coming off a major injury. There's just no path, and he's probably the worst pick that you could think of on ESPN right now, being in the top 80.
Yeah. And then the next guy on the list, we're going to keep going with the running backs. Jaylen Warren. It's you take your side. Either way, you pick Najee or you pick Jaylen. If you're higher on one or the other, neither of them need to be going at 82 or 79 on these redraft sites. In my opinion, I think they're closer. We have him, of course, ranked 104. If you think that he's going to be better than Najee, just flip their positions, and that puts him in the low 90s, or high 80s for us. I mean, right there, and that's still too low, like still lower than you drafting him at 82.
Yeah, with Jaylen, it's kind of a frustrating thing. This is kind of like, James Conner post Steelers when it was just a very inefficient just way of going about things. Well, Najee he's never not had 1,000 yards in the season. It's just his ADP was so high that he continued to not pan out based on ADP. Well, now there's a more offensive run-friendly offense that he's going in. Whether it be Russell Wilson or in our ideal world, Justin Fields, that's more opportunity for him because you can't just stack 8 in the box because Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph are handing you the football. You have to account for read options and all that stuff, which plays more into his strengths because he has I don't know what ceiling Najee has, but he has a floor of 1,000 all-purpose yards and 7-8 touchdowns. And I just don't know if Jaylen Warren, in turn, can even come close to that production. And they're basically identical ADPs. I think in an ideal world, if you're on the Jaylen Warren over Najee side, it's more so at the detriment of Najee either getting hurt or just sucking, and they're like one's 110th overall and one's 95th, rather than I see a world where Najee cracks the top 60, and then Jaylen Warren's just way back there.
So for me, you look at Jaylen Warren and you look at Arthur Smith in Atlanta. And you have, of course, Bijan, Tyler Algier there. Then you go to Pittsburgh and you have Najee and Jaylen Warren. Well, I actually think that Najee fits the Tyler Algier style of play more.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference in ability is so much closer between the two. And so to me, I think that, Arthur Smith wants to run the ball. That's fine. The guy that can run the ball better, and I know the efficiency metrics, y'all are all going to get in the comments to talk about those. I know that Jaylen had a better efficiency metric, but that's just it's so inconsistent when he's also the third down back. If he gets the ball on those downs, like he's hitting lighter boxes. When there are true 8-man boxes, when they're true first down, second down and long type of boxes, that's when Najee runs the ball. And of course, he's not going to do as well against those. I just think with the new offensive line, with the new coaches, he fits what they want to do better than Jaylen Warren. And that's why I'm on the train with Najee. Not because I think he's better than Jaylen Warren. Actually, funny enough, I've been harping on the fact that I don't think Najee's that good at football for a long time. Well, that was also when he was, in the third, fourth round? Like, I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah, or like when he came into the NFL, he was a first-round pick.
Yeah, and I was like, there's no way they should have done that. That was terrible. Landon Dickerson. Just saying, y'all picked Najee over Landon Dickerson, and your offensive line is awful at that point. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I think that maybe Najee's not a very good football player, but whatever.
And again, coming back from it, his rookie year, he was a first-round pick. He was RB3.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So he panned out based on where you drafted him. And I actually had a ton of him in his first-round year, and that was my first year in best ball, and that was before the wide receiver frenzy, and
right.
Essentially all the reliable running backs were not panning out, and all the receivers were, and that's why the ADPs have flipped. And then he just kind of gradually, he was RB14, then RB23, but every year it's 1,200 yards, it's 8 touchdowns.
I remember this because I got heckled, and people made fun of me for saying that Najee was a bad pick at 24. And I was like, okay, like, fine, whatever. Y'all are right because he did go running back 3. Mm-hmm. Well, since then, I've been right for the most part. And it's because you just have to build your team differently. And I will never be a running back in the first round guy. This next year, there's going to be a few. So it's one of those things where, like, that's just my stand on it. I just think there's more important positions. And so I did get a little bit annoyed with the Steelers. But it was at the end of the day, like, pick him, don't pick him. And I don't think he's better than most of the league.
Right. And then if you want to do a narrative perspective, contract year for a running back that didn't get extended. And what do historically coaches do on running backs that are in their prime, that are in a contract year? They run them into the ground and then move on. So if I was a betting man, I think he has one of his best seasons, and then he's not a Steeler next year.
Yep.
The only path is he gets hurt and he comes back on a discount. But I think it's more likely than not his last season as a Steeler, and they know that, and he's going to be a 300 touch guy.
Yep.
Whether that's efficient or not, who knows? But his ADP is reasonable, and we kind of turned this into for Najee, but it's mainly to go with, like, if we're so for this guy in this offense, why are we going to choose the other guy at the same exact price?
Right, for sure.
And that's just kind of the stand we're taking. So
what, we were talking about Jaylen Warren?
Yeah.
No, just kidding. No, Najee's rankings are actually pretty even with where we have him on all the other sites too. So it's not really something we were going to talk about on our Loves video. But next up, because we've talked too long about Najee and Jaylen Warren's situation, is DeAndre Swift. I think there's just too much hype and too much love for him because he's going to a new offense and he's already, okay. When you get kicked out of 2 places because you're probably, okay, so he goes to Detroit. If he starts in Detroit, he's, there and he gets injured. He can't stay on the field. When he's on the field, he doesn't get the goal line touches. He's more of a receiving back. They're not using him correctly. Then he goes to Philly. He has like 2 really good games and kind of mid the rest of the year, 8-point fantasy points a game unless he scores. It's just, he hasn't done anything special, and we're really touting him as such a good football player. And I just don't know that I think he's a good football player. And that makes it hard when there are 2 pretty good football players behind him at running back in Khalil Herbert and Roshan. And right now, ESPN has a 61 RB20, and I'm just like, I can't get behind that. I just can't do it.
And this doesn't mean that we just think he's going to bomb, but it's just like, listen, his ADP is just kind of right where his best years are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his career best year is RB15, and then every other year he's RB20, RB21, RB20, and it's just like, where's the upside? He's never had the important goal line touches. Last year was his career high in terms of yards, opportunities, all that stuff, and he still only had 6 touchdowns in
Still
one of the best
RB20.
offenses in the NFL.
Yep.
Chicago is a downgrade in terms of offense, but he has a bigger amount of competition. We saw, and we've talked about, throughout the summer, Khalil Herbert, Roshan Johnson. Khalil Herbert is a really good running back. He's also in a contract year. And what did I just say about Najee? Normally, teams in contract years just give the ball to,
Or they get rid of them.
or they get rid of him. And guess what? I think it's one or the other. I think he is going to be an annoying menace of getting the important touches. So similar to 2022 when Jamal Williams led the league in touchdowns and he wasn't that efficient. But guess what? He had 18 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift would just go and go and go. And then, 5 rushing touchdowns. And he also has missed 3 games in 3 or 4 years. And we just don't really see upside with that. And then in turn, we see Roshan Johnson coming up. He had a good first preseason game. Khalil Herbert has had good boom games. He finished the last year, I think 2 of the last 3 games, he had over 100 yards. So he's a very capable and good running back.
Mhm.
So if it's just going to be them 3, I don't see a path where he has 17 touches a game.
It's a committee.
Really, it's a complete committee, and the only thing that will save him is if he is one of the running back leaders in receptions,
Right.
which is on the board. But in terms of rushing props, I don't know what on top of my head what his rushing yards prop is, but I would probably comfortably take the under. I'd comfortably take his rushing touchdown under, and receiving work is really his only claim to fame. So if you're in a half PPR league, don't even come close to touching him. You have my attention if it's a PPR league, but not in the early 6th round. That's just kind of where I view this.
So another thing is he also has receivers behind him that aren't bad at catching the ball. Running backs behind him that aren't bad at catching the ball either. So I just don't see a true path for him to have a better season than last year, minimum. And then on the top of that, like he could see less volume, and that would just kill him basically, right, because he's not efficient.
And it's not like, if you look at best ball, our ranking overall with him is exactly where he's going in best ball. Right. You want to take him and you don't believe in Chicago's backups, or if you just want to have the handcuff approach, completely fine with that as an RB3. But if you are in the RB2 range, I need you to have some kind of a floor or a ceiling. And I don't think he has a ceiling to be an RB1. And I don't think he has the floor to be an RB2. That's kind of where I'm at with him.
Yep. And then, so we'll jump to the next guy. It's Jordan Love. And it's not that we dislike Jordan Love. The price right now for what he's shown is a little daunting. At the same time, like he could be the guy, and he ended up quarterback 5 last year. We're at quarterback 10 across the board for every site. But quarterbacks are a little pushed up on Yahoo and ESPN. So when you're doing redraft, you should know that. And it's not like he's necessarily the best guy in that range either. Like there's a bunch of guys around him that, could be just as good or better. So I'm a little bit worrisome on him, I guess.
Yeah, so with him,
if
I'm going to the 7th round and I'm taking my quarterback, that means I probably want a guy that I can start every single week.
Mm-hmm.
He is good. We think that we're taking some in best ball. We understand reasonable schedule to end the season. The problem is I don't know if I can start him every week. And that's kind of blurring the lines between like my faith in him as a player versus, fantasy production. Because sometimes even if you hate James Conner, you still got to draft him. I've learned that by not drafting him.
Yeah.
Sometimes, he just got his big extension. It's the smallest sample size. Absolutely hate it from a front office perspective. It's just way too big of an investment. that doesn't mean that he will suck this year. But also, we also don't know if it's lightning in the bottle when he ended the season, and we've talked about this, lightning in the bottle to end the season with his final 8-week stretch, or if that's what he is and he
Mhm.
will improve from. Because it took him a long time to get to that. Because I don't know if I could draft a quarterback in the first round in 2020. I think 2020. Yeah, because he was in the
Yeah.
the class
2020 or
with Herbert
2019,
and
one of
Tua
the two.
and all
Yeah,
them.
yeah, that's right.
So I don't know if I can, draft him in the first round, and then year 4, I finally get it. I finally see the spark, because they would have moved on from Aaron Rodgers sooner
If
if
they
they
would have
did,
saw it,
and
yeah,
they didn't.
for sure.
And the first half of the season, he was closer to Desmond Ridder than he was to Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray.
QB5.
And right now, he's kind of going in that tier with Kyler and Jordan. Obviously, they're a couple of spots higher, but if I'm going to target a quarterback in the 7th round, I want somebody that I can feel good about starting every week. And Kyler and Dak, for the most part, unless it's just say CD goes down and it's just Jalen Tolbert and nothing, I don't
Right.
know if I want to start Dak or Kyler. If Marvin Harrison or Trey McBride goes down,
Okay.
much lower floor, so I understand.
But he has the rushing upside.
Yeah, exactly. And so with Jordan Love, I don't think receivers will indicate whether or not he is. I just don't know from a talent perspective if we're just overvaluing him right now.
Right. And then the next guy on the list is Rhamondre. And this is a pure difference in ADP ranking, because the fact that Rhamondre is pushed up into the 5-6 turn is just a little scary. He's playing on the worst offense in football. I'm a big believer in drafting good offenses all day long. And, sometimes you get number 1 players on a bad offense, Malik Neighbors-esque type players, and it just won't pan out because they can't score touchdowns. Well, Rhamondre last year couldn't score touchdowns, and he lost his workload in the pass game.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just a little nervous about the fact that, we're going to be like, oh, Rhamondre is a top 60 player.
Yeah, so with him, it's purely a ADP thing. We've been taking a lot of him in best ball, actually. And we think, and just because you're in the worst offense, it actually correlates more. And you wouldn't think this, but Mason Dodd with Fantasy Flock did a good job of kind of breaking this down. Like the top 5 worst producing offenses and correlating receiver production was much worse than running back.
Right.
Like you can be a terrible. Look at Breece Hall, prime example.
Yes.
Finishes his RB2, and Jets averaged 14 points a game.
Right.
He had 3 rushing touchdowns, and yet was RB2. And it's just because you can get volume, especially at the end of the year when it's just like we're not playing for anything. We're just gonna try to get you your 1,000 yards, even if the Jets don't know how to count. But regardless, I just don't know if I can invest in the 5th round for somebody like that, where it's kind of a floor play.
Right.
It's not a ceiling play. And it's not like there's any running backs around that range that's just like, oh, I'd much rather have this guy. It's just that whole range in general. In the 5th round, we've talked about in our Loves video, tight end is where you should be going in there, where Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, and then even in the 6th round, Kyle Pitts are going. That's where you should be targeting those guys. You shouldn't be going your RB2 there. You should be going a big running back early, maybe even 2 in the first 4 rounds, but you shouldn't be going your RB2 in the 5th round if that's your option, in my eyes.
Right. And this is redraft, so redraft's a little bit different than, best ball. We did a whole best ball introduction video. Redraft, you have to get guys that you can start each week. That's the plan, right?
So yeah,
draft running backs.
If I'm just spitballing an idea, right? I feel more comfortable on a weekly basis starting Kenneth Walker 1 round early as an RB2. I know 4th round he's going in the 6th round in Underdog and DraftKings, so it's kind of like the same. Like he's pushed up a couple rounds, but he feels much safer to me than Rhamondre does. And it's just like I'd rather go, if you're gonna go, just I want 2 running backs that I'm gonna start every week, and then take some flyers on rookies and whatnot. Just go receiver, running back, receiver, running back, tight end, quarterback, and then figure it out.
Yeah.
Or something of that nature, instead of just kind of running back in the 5th. I just think that's the wrong range to target a running back in. I would just rather go elsewhere.
Right. And we've also talked about the fact that these wide receivers are pushed down and the running backs are pushed up. So make sure that you take advantage of that, maybe. Next guy, Zamir White, same situation. Literally spitting image of Rhamondre, except for Zamir has never had a full-time role. And so we actually have more question marks with him. Now, on Underdog and DraftKings, it's fine, because he's going in the mid 70s. But on here, it's like, okay, I could see basically you can write the path for Zamir. He's in a better offense than the Patriots, but it's like you have to take a little bit of like, can he repeat what he did when he got the playing time? Can he repeat 23 rushes a game
for a full season?
Yeah, like no, that's not realistic. I don't feel like.
And then on top of that, he just has zero upside in the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not end all be all when you're in a bad offense or a below average offense and you're a running back. However, a lot of those guys that do pan out, like Brees Hall, he didn't get RB2 because of his rushing production. It was because of his receiving work and how he's getting 10, 11 targets in some weeks.
Yeah.
Zamir White is going to get 20 rushes and 1 target. That is his like upside in terms of touches. And it's just whether or not he falls into the end zone. And I think there's a lot of weeks that he could give you just frustrating results. We've talked about guys like Mike Davis before and Alexander Madison who have never been full-time that are by default the starter. And they go in the 5th, 6th round, and it just does not work out. Zach Moss to us is a greater candidate to fulfill that kind of group. However, he's going in the 90s.
Right.
3-4 rounds later, Zamir White, you got to pick in the 6th round, and at least on Yahoo and ESPN, and we're just not there with him. And again, kind of similar to remind you what I was saying, I just don't feel comfortable on a weekly basis. Just like he's my starter every week, and I don't know how to predict when he's going to have 20 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown and get you 12 points. Like there's no ceiling. There's only floor. It's a decent floor, but it's not enough to just kind of, I just see, and it would, and I've brought it up before, but it would just be so ironic if Alexander Madison, who was going in the same spot last year as the default replacement for Dalvin Cook, and he just fell flat on his face and lost work to Ty Chandler. If Zamir White is in that same thing, and the very person that he loses work to as the season progresses is Alexander Madison.
Right, for sure. And then the next guy on our list is George Kittle. This is because of George Kittle is tight end 5 on both Yahoo and ESPN. We have him at tight end 8. We're just not as high as on him. It's basically because of inconsistencies. Like when he has a good game, you're a little bit annoyed if you're playing them that week because he could go for 30. That's the type of thing that he can do. But when he has, just a 2 for, what was it in the Super Bowl?
2 for 4.
2 for 4. Yeah. So that happens just as much. We have, of course, we talk about George Kittle and I talk about Evan Ingram. I'm actually a little bit higher on Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram, his floor when, of course, Christian Kirk was out, we'll talk about that on a different day, was, 9, 9, 9, 9.
German or what?
Yes. No, but so with him, like he had a floor of much higher than George Kittle. George Kittle could have no catches, and you're not surprised. He could also have 3 touchdowns, and that shouldn't surprise you either because of the talent. So that's one of the weird things about George Kittle and why I think he should be ranked lower in redraft leagues than he is on like best ball.
Yeah, in best ball, he's the ideal tight end that you'd want if you're going to do a 2 tight end build and you want 2 really good ones. A guy, very few tight ends can give you 30-point or high 20-point upside. But also, it comes with the floor. I'm going to read his game log in the first 6 weeks. 4.9, 6.0, 16, 1.9, 27.7, 1.1. But then he goes 23.9, 20.6, 22.9, and then he goes 4.9. He also has a 5.9 in there. He has a 7 in there. Like, there's just way too much ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And in best ball, you don't have to make those start-sit decisions. But when you know that the 49ers every week are going to score 30 points, but other than knowing Christian McCaffrey is going to be involved on one, you don't know where the rest are coming from. That's the frustrating part. And so you have other guys that are going around before that. We talked about McBride, Kincaid, and Andrews, who have been wide receiver 1s on their team. We know if Baltimore scores 30 points, Mark Andrews, good chance he's going to be involved on some. Dalton Kincaid, could be wide receiver one or number one in target share on that team.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Trey McBride. So they just have such a higher floor, and that's why they're going around early. They may not be able to consistently get you to 30 points or have the touchdown upside, but they're going to provide you the floor that you're not going to be frustrated that you go into the 3 o'clock games and you are projected to win by 10, and then all of a sudden you're projected to lose after 30 minutes. And it's like, why? Oh, George Kittle has 0 targets in 3 quarters. Like, that's the kind of thing you got to deal with George Kittle.
Right. And then the next guys on this list are CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson. Both are going about the same area. I think that, most of this slide itself is more for the fact that we are lower on Anthony Richardson and he's kind of still in the same area as CJ Stroud. But also CJ Stroud is going a tad bit too early in general on Sleeper. It's just a weird situation to be so excited about Anthony Richardson when CJ Stroud is basically going at the same position as him.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson is just too much of a unknown. And last year we took a lot of bait of, Justin Fields is going to get you the floor of 20 and he's going to have so much upside, and then he gets hurt
Mm-hmm.
or is not playing well, and then your 4th or 5th round investment is just falling flat on his face. Anthony Richardson, for as yoked as he is, as strong as he is, as athletic as he is, has been so extremely injury prone in the last 4 or 5 years. Like, there is a gaggle of injury history with him. A lot of it's lower body, but then last year, he gets banged up on a shoulder stinger. He gets concussed and then goes down with a shoulder injury. I mixed it up. He also had an ankle injury. That was 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
And you're telling me you have confidence after basically 3 games of a sample that he's QB6, going ahead of guys like Dak, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray. And obviously Joe Burrow is consistently injured, but we've also seen ceilings of him where he's a top 5 quarterback. Jordan Love, even. We talked at the Hates video. Like, he's going 2-3 rounds after that. I just don't have any faith that I can trust him for a full season. CJ Stroud is a very good quarterback. He had the best rookie season probably in the modern era, at least in the last 20 years as a quarterback, as a rookie, from a statistical perspective. Houston just came out of nowhere, but now there are expectations, and with that comes a rise in ADP. So right now you have to draft him in the 4th round on every platform, and that's just way, way too rich for me. It's not like even last year he had a ton of crazy ceiling games. He just kind of was consistently getting you 17, but that's not going to win you leagues. There's a lot of guys kind of going in that same range, like Jalen Hurts and Lamar, that are just like a half a round or a round early, that every week is going to get you 23, 24. And CJ Stroud, he's talented enough to take that leap, but I think we're rising him up a little too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're just kind of learning from our mistakes, because last year, all the young up and coming quarterbacks that we think are going to take the leap, but we haven't seen it yet. Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, etc., Joe Burrow, and then all of them failed.
Yes. Or injury.
They failed
yes.
because of injury mostly, but it just doesn't work out like that. So now, because of the hesitancy, all those guys dropped.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have a new, set of guys, Jordan Love, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, that everybody wants to jump up on.
Right.
Completely understand the logic behind it, but we're just trying to learn from our mistakes. And if I'm going to take a quarterback early, I'd rather take Patrick Mahomes in the early 4th round than a late 4th rounder on these 2 guys.
Yeah.
It's just plain and simple.
Fair enough. I think that, it's also, you could take some veterans, Kyler, Joe, like you said, that are a little bit more comfortable. You're not projecting as much as you're kind of know what they're capable of.
I'll put it like this. I have no confidence for sure that either CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson can outscore Jaden Daniels.
That's fair.
That doesn't mean that, for sure, Jaden Daniels, lock him in, put him up. But I'm just saying
There's
that
a
Jaden
path.
Daniels, 1,000 yards on the ground, 4,000 yards passing in college, coming into the NFL, you're telling he can't have 60 rushing yards and then 7 touchdowns on the season and about 210 passing yards a game? That's going to put him as like QB7, QB8.
Yeah.
And CJ Stroud doesn't really have rushing upside. It's all going to be through the air. Anthony Richardson, injury history, and
Injuries.
he's going 6 rounds earlier.
Yeah.
So I'm just not a fan of that build or approach, and so that's just kind of where we're taking that stand on in terms of the quarterback position.
Right. And then the next guy, Derrick Henry, we've harped on him a little bit, this offseason. It's just we have him on a different level completely than the rest of everybody. Like, we just don't believe that he can be as productive as it sounds great on paper. Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, and they don't necessarily have a ton, but he's 29. He's, he has had injuries. Like, I'm just not there on Derrick Henry, and it's just I'm just not getting any of him. That's fine if you want to. I'm just not with you. It's okay.
I'm not even saying it's okay if you want to. There's no reason he needs to be in the top 20 of a fantasy draft, whether that's
Right.
in best ball or redraft. In basically everything, he's going in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah.
He has no upside to be what he once was to me. He is the safest RB2 you can have on your team. That is where I'm putting it. He's, I believe, where we have him overall. We
54th.
have him,
54th.
in terms of position, RB16.
16,
sorry.
yeah.
So he's above a lot of guys that we think have, upside to be potentially breakout stars and stuff. Very safe. He will get you 12 to 15 touchdowns, 1,000 total yards. He's a 0 in the past game. Justice Hill apparently is running a ton of ones. I don't see where he's going to be in any 2-minute drill situations. He's never going to have more than 3 or 4 targets in a game, and those will be far and few in between. He's going to make you bank if he has 20 carries for 80 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, it's all touchdown related.
That's capable. That's
all
possible.
Touchdowns.
He is a safe bet to be a touchdown leader. But that doesn't mean that just because he has 15 touchdown upside, he should be flirting with being a top 5 running back.
No.
That doesn't make any sense to me. We're actually going to do a bold prediction video at the end of the year, and I have a really good idea what I want to, state or claim about the running back position, and he's not involved in that.
Right.
I think the position is going to have an uptick in upside. We've had a couple of years straight where basically all the top guys of running backs have not panned out, or
Right.
most of them, and a lot of receivers have. And the ADPs have flipped. And usually how the football gods work is when everybody is zigging, football gods zag.
Right.
And so you want to be against the grain on what others are doing. And so basically all receivers are propping up, and he's one of the running backs still hanging on, and it's just straight up name value.
Yep.
It makes sense from a football perspective. Again, one of the safest floors you can have. He will get you 12 to 14 every week, but that's not going to end up being an RB7 overall. I can tell you that much right now.
All right. And then the next guy on our list is Isiah Pacheco. Pacheco is one of those guys that we think will have a better season than he did last year. That is what it is. That's true. But I'm not comfortable taking him at the 2-3 turn. Like, there are a lot of really good football players, and it's really hard for me to say, oh, he should be above Travis Etienne. He should be above Josh Jacobs. Guys that have all the opportunities just like him, but are better at football. Like, and I know that everybody loves Isiah Pacheco, his running style, that's great. But I have more upside when I go get Kyron, or I go get Travis Etienne, who has receiving upside, or James Cook even at times. Like, I just think that this is a tough player to grade out, because he could be RB5, but I also could see him being RB15.
So with him, I think he is exactly what we kind of similarly view James Conner to be, which is an average running back that just has inherited a ungodly amount of touches, no competition, and he just makes the most of it. And kudos to you. You're an NFL player, so if you have opportunity, you should be capable
Right.
of
Going and
enhancing
running
that.
with it.
The thing is, he's in a similar boat to Rashee Rice, where those two by default were the only two that were really a reliable threat last year. And the reason I don't include Kelsey is just because last year he was a first round pick.
Right.
So
For sure.
obviously he was a bust based on where he was going. And also he's a year older and et cetera and so on. Well, Isiah Pacheco, they don't add anything to the running back room. They actually lose their pass catching back.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, instead of, it's purely somebody's role, they're putting Kadarius Toney back there. And they're putting, I bet you Sky Moore will get some annoying gadget plays. And Deneric Prince, who's never had a single NFL touch, who was last year's end of season, 20th round, take him. That guy is getting work with the twos.
Right.
So while we're starting to draft a little of him, there's no competition for touches. It's even worse of a running back situation past the RB1 than somebody like Dallas,
Mm-hmm.
which Rico Dowdle is inheriting opportunities. And, if he ends up being the RB30 instead of Zeke, cool. He has no ceiling, etc. So nobody is competing with him for touches. He's going to get 20 opportunities a game. But second round is a little rich for me.
Well, just like I said, I think he could be the RB 13, 14, 15. And I don't think that's out of the realm.
Right.
There's a lot of good running backs. And like you said, your bold prediction is going to be about running backs. So why couldn't he be the one that doesn't pan out? Especially when you have to spend a pretty penny on him. Like, you have to spend your second round pick on him to make it. You get lucky if you're in the third, basically.
Yeah, so essentially, if you want him, you have to take him in the second round, because unless you have the first overall pick and maybe he falls to you at the start of the third round, that's where he's going. And it's just there's so many receivers that I'd rather have there, especially in PPR leagues. And it's not like from a ADP perspective, that's the issue here. It's not the position rank. We have him as into the tier RB1 as RB11. They have him as RB9. That's fine, but that's 2 full rounds difference in terms of complete rank.
Right.
It's just we just value if it's a PPR league, even if he has one of the safest floors. I just don't see the upside, especially with what they added to the receiving core. I don't expect Patrick Mahomes to have his worst career season again, and that kind of correlated with his production last year.
Yeah.
But also, he was going 6th, 7th round. Year before, he was going in the 10th. Now he's going in the 2nd. Yep. And so it's you're trying to force an upside rather than it just organically coming. And that's just kind of where I'm at with that. I don't see him in the same tier or floor as a Kyron Williams, who led the league in points per game outside of Christian McCaffrey.
Yep.
There's no rhyme or reason he should be in that tier or grouping. Like him as a player, 4th rounder, I'm sold. 2nd rounder, I'm building my team differently.
Fair enough. Looking at the last guy on this list is AJ Brown. AJ is ranked 9th across the board, and we have him at 12th. He's wide receiver 6 across the board. We have him at wide receiver 8. Not to say we don't like AJ Brown. When you make decisions in the first round of any draft, you have to really adjust very small ADPs and things like that. Well, three differences in ADP here makes him behind 2 other receivers in Puka and Garrett Wilson on our board. That's a big difference. I think that's important to note that, the closer you get to the number 1 overall pick, the bigger each spot matters, basically.
Yeah. So with him, it's not about his talent. We love AJ Brown. He's one of our favorite receivers. But you can't just target every single first rounder that's ADP up there. And he has the most competition. And last year, again, we talked about in our Loves video, Devontae Smith. He outscored AJ Brown the final 10 weeks of the season. And AJ Brown does have the boom weeks, but you also have the occasional 8 to 10 points.
Right.
That I don't think any other player in the first round really has that kind of floor. Everybody else, at worst, is going to be 14 to 15. Maybe Puka is the only other guy that could flirt with that. But again, he's coming into his prime. Cooper Kupp is exiting. And even when Cooper Kupp came back from his injuries, he was still right there with production. And then guess what happened in the playoffs? One of my biggest mistakes was like, oh, they're going against Detroit, the worst secondary in the NFL. They're going to go all reliable. Cooper Kupp is going to go. No, he had 26 yards, and Puka Nacua set a rookie record for a playoff debut with 180.
It's just insane.
A.J. Brown has that upside too. But also, Saquon Barkley is back in the offense now. And Devontae Smith is right there in terms of talent and production.
Right.
So with my first round pick, I'd rather have somebody safer. It's not, again, ranking wise, we're right there. Like in tier wide receiver 1.
Right. Yeah, he's a wide receiver 1 for sure.
But to me, I'm much more comfortable if he falls into the second round. And he's one of the few receivers of the Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua tier that is staying in the first round. Everybody else, on occasion, you'll see in the second round. But he's the only one that's staying at the back end in the first. And again, we have to take a stand on one of these guys. Last year, Stephon Diggs was our call. We were correct on it. I think A.J. Brown's kind of that guy this year.
Mm-hmm. And I agree. I think that it's tough when you have a rushing quarterback and a better running back room. Devontae Smith, a year older. We talked about him on our other video. It's just there are opportunities for A.J. Brown to have down weeks. And he's going to get mad about it. He got mad about it last year when he wasn't getting the ball. But it is what it is. That's just how that team works. They're probably going to put up a ton of points, but sometimes it doesn't really matter.
It's kind of like I can compare it to Bijan last year, right? Bijan finished as a top 10 running back.
Yeah.
And
not good.
That was not good. When you drafted him at the end of the first or early second last year, you needed him to be a top 5 or even top 3.
Right.
And he was not there, and that's why he didn't work out. With A.J. Brown, if he finishes as wide receiver 9 or 10, he didn't win you anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was good enough. But guess what? Marvin Harrison Jr., he is a rookie, earliest rookie that is ever being drafted in ADP. I feel safer about him than A.J. Brown. That doesn't mean that, oh, Marvin Harrison for sure, put it down. He's gonna outperform A.J. Brown. He has no competition for touches. In an offense that's reasonable, Kyler Murray has produced good receiving and skill players. A.J. Brown has the most competition, and you got to invest the first in him. We love him as a player. We do. That's kind of how I compare it. Is like I don't see him being a top 3 wide receiver. He's the only guy in the first round going. Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Puka even, that I don't see him as a top 3 receiver. And if I'm drafting a first round pick, I am hoping that I get top 3 production at his position. And I just don't see that. So that's why we're going to take that stand.
Exactly. So that's the end of our hates video for ADP redraft. We appreciate y'all hanging out. We would love it if y'all would like, comment, subscribe on this video. Tell us who y'all's least favorite player is at ADP currently. Kind of give us some tidbits into what you think. We'd really appreciate it. That's just kind of how we want to build it, and we want to talk about all these players. There's a lot of really good football players, and not everybody can pan out, basically.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Like Em said, check out all our socials, all the video content we have coming out. It's going to be a busy, busy month, and it'll hopefully be informative, entertaining for you guys. Live streaming every Wednesday until the season starts. Coming out with rankings 2.0 and 3.0 in the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned for all that. But with this video, I want to see who is the guy that you're not touching. I want that question, and I also want to know who are we just dead wrong about, because we're not going to be right on every single guy, but we feel pretty good that we're going to be batting pretty well enough to where we'll be not forsaken by just putting these guys on the list.
Right.
And even if these guys pan out in terms of ADP, we feel good about they're just not going to hit the ceiling that they, should based on where they're going. And, again, we're not always correct. We want this to be a discussion. This isn't a tell you what to do and you do it by GTD. This is active. This is
for sure.
Engaging, ongoing. And
we're not always right.
Maybe you see something that we're just not seeing, and I want to hear all about that. So please join the discussion. Check out our other videos, and until then, we'll see y'all in the next one.
Yep. Have a good one.